It's the Brad and John Show.
Today's date is Monday, May 5th, and this is the C block, Charlie block, which means we start at right around 7:40 or so. John, before we get back into the thing we just talked about, we're talking about cars. You know I'm a car freak, okay? Can I vent a little bit here?
Yeah, please do.
It's gotten to the point where cars have gotten, especially trucks. I mean, I want to sound like an old guy, but my first truck I ever bought was a 1987 Ford F-150. Bought it brand new at Davis Sinclair Ford in South County. I paid $8,200 for a brand new truck, okay? If you were to go buy, first off, you can't even buy that truck anymore because of the fact it was a 6-cylinder stick. They don't even make a stick shift anymore. It was like as low as you can go. There was no options in this car, crank windows and the whole bit, okay? If you go to your local Ford dealer and look at the F-150s, I think the bottom price you'll find is like $45,000, okay? There is a truck that Toyota has manufactured, and they're selling them in other parts of the world, called the Hilux Champ. And what's interesting about this is, if this car would be imported in the United States, take a guess, and it's a pickup truck, a small pickup truck, guess what the price would be if they were to sell this car. In other words, it's already being sold in other countries. If you adjust the currency, guess what this truck would be selling for in the United States?
So I'm guessing it's cheap. You're saying maybe $30,000.
$12,000.
You're kidding me.
$12,000 for the Hilux Champ.
Is the government subsidizing production in Japan?
No. What's interesting about this is, let's go to General Motors. General Motors has a vehicle they're selling. And see, what's interesting about it is the small pickup truck market has exploded to the point where when Ford came out with the Maverick, which is their small pickup truck, they can't make enough of them. And matter of fact, to the point when they first came out, you had guys who were on the wait list for them who literally would put a couple hundred miles on them and then take them and sell them for $10,000 over sticker, and people would buy them left and right. Okay? The same thing with Hyundai. They have a thing called the Santa Cruz, which essentially is like a four-door kind of pickup truck kind of thing. Okay? It's huge. And what's interesting about it is General Motors has a vehicle called the Montana, and it's not necessarily the General Motors used to, I think might have been in Pontiac brand. They had a minivan called the Montana. This is not a minivan. This is a four-door pickup truck, small pickup truck, same situation. And what they have designated this truck as in their GEM market, GEM. And you know what GEM stands for?
General Excited Motors.
Global Emerging Markets. They're only
nice. Okay, aka third world countries.
They're only selling these cheap vehicles in third world countries, and they will not import them into the United States. Toyota will not. And the interesting part of this is the Toyota Hilux is a pickup truck that is worldwide. If you were to buy in the United States, it's called the Toyota Tacoma, which is not the same truck. The Toyota Hilux is when you see the terrorists driving around with 50 caliber machine guns mounted in the back of a pickup truck. It's a Toyota Hilux. It's one of these, United States, we spend millions of dollars for an up-armored, military vehicle. They spend $20,000 on a Toyota Hilux, and they bolt a 50 caliber machine gun into the bed of the truck, and that's their attack vehicle. So that shows the difference between what we're doing. And what's crazy about this is, I'm looking at this going like, okay, why won't they import them? Because they don't want to destroy the market that they're supporting the price level for these expensive cars and trucks. If all of a sudden they had the Toyota Hilux Champ in the United States, you could buy one for $12,000. They wouldn't sell any Toyota Tacomas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you don't think there's anything wrong with that. You're just saying that that's an interesting fact, right?
I think there's everything wrong with that. I think they should, because what's happened is I think that they're pricing the car manufacturers to the point where, same thing with houses nowadays. If you were a young person right out of college, unless you got like unless you're a doctor, an attorney, and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to afford a house or a car or anything like that. I mean, like when you go to the car dealership, the average car is like $50,000 nowadays.
So the car companies should hurt their own market in the U.S. just to give people more affordable cars, is what you're saying?
I'm not saying hurt their market. They'd sell more of them. I mean, but even so, let's say they, the exchange rate would make it a $12,000 truck. Charge $18,000. They'd still sell the crap out of them. They make $6,000 a piece above and beyond what they're making in the other markets.
Do you think there might be a person that works at a car manufacturer who actually has worked those numbers before, Brad? So in other words, if the Brad Hildebrand logic of cut the price by 2/3, you'll sell more. The numbers work. Do you think maybe they have a model that figured out that wasn't true like decades ago?
Well, John, the problem is that you used to be able to buy, if you go to a car dealership, you used to be able to buy a base car. And I bought many of them. Matter of fact, I've had several of my trucks, have been base trucks.
Right, we got it. So your point is you could buy it cheap, and now it's too expensive.
Well, but
so if you can't afford a car, aren't you just kind of out of luck? Like, too bad. Like, walk to your job.
No.
Bike.
They've loaded them up with so many options that's what's made it expensive. You can't buy a base vehicle anymore. I remember back in the day, if you had a car that had electric windows, oh my God, you had a Cadillac. Nowadays, every car has electric windows. And
the judge just texted and they said, "Whoa, whoa, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Do you remember when cars had a crank window?
What?
Remember that, Brad? And you could buy a car for $200.
John, think about this for a minute. Do you know what Levittown is in New York? You ever heard of Levittown?
I have not, no.
Levittown was infamous because that was the template for subdivisions all over the country. Levittown was started by a builder. I think his name was Levi or Levitt or something like that. And he bought a big plot of land in New York, and he built very small, affordable homes for the returning GIs. It was the small little 800-900 square foot home on a small lot.
Okay, got it. Starter home, the proverbial starter home. And
Right.
then what happened, Brad?
Well, nobody built starter homes anymore. I mean, think about that for a minute. Nobody builds starter homes anymore because you know why?
Because you can't make money on them.
Well, the munis won't allow it. They won't.
Okay.
They won't zone that because they don't want "quote unquote" low-income people in their munis.
Yeah, don't you want to live in a community where people can't afford to live there, Brad? Do you want to live in Kenlock or do you want to live in Chesterfield?
John?
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with Kenlock. I'll tell you what. North County's great. I would buy a house there today. I'm not scared. You're talking to the guy that'll drive to the city to buy a lawnmower from a drug dealer named Reggie. Yeah, we know, Brad.
You stole my thunder. Okay, I'll move on because John's sliced and diced me. Okay, we'll go back to we teased it in A block. We talked about it in B block. We'll pick it up in C block. John, summarize, then we'll talk about what Washington University should or should not do.
Yeah, a gentleman who does not appear to be a political guy parked his Tesla in Kirkwood, Missouri, a beautiful suburb of Missouri. His cameras caught a guy slapping an F Elon sticker on his car twice. The gentleman who owns the car, Mr. Kirk, confronted the gentleman who slapped a sticker on, a guy named Bill Howells, and had the hilarity ensued. Mr. Howells, in so many words, tucked his tail between his legs and ran away. And the clip went, quote unquote, viral. No charges are going to be filed. But very quickly, people identified that Mr. Howells works at Washington University. Despite what knuckle draggers and gun jumpers will say, Mr. Howells is not a professor at Washington University. He appears to work in like a neuroscience or mental health, the medical school type of lab, and he's a data analyst there. So the question we asked Brad to each other was, what should WashU do with Mr. Howells? Do they have to get rid of him now?
Okay, can I tell you how WashU is going to handle this?
Tell me how they're going to handle it, and then tell me what you think they should do.
Okay, here's how they're going to handle it. They're going to have a little press conference, and they're going to say, Mr. Howells, we have seen what he's done, and we do not approve of what he's done, and we have admonished him, and we are going to essentially tell him never to do this again. And then as the press leaves, they're going to walk back in the room, and there's Mr. Howells, and they're going to go, dude, high five, dude, high five. That's what's going to happen at WashU.
I think what's going to happen is I think they're going to fire him, and they're going to replace him with Megan Green. And they're going to say, we want a progressive activist who doesn't use stickers, but does protest in the quad and does enter university buildings to relieve her bladder. I think that's what's going to happen. And meanwhile, Winston Calvert, who took Megan Green's job, is sitting in an office somewhere, being a civilized human being, not slapping stickers on cars, not peeing in WashU buildings during a protest, and teaching people at the School of Social Work how to be better, more effective advocates.
John, you are a graduate of Washington University. Does this embarrass you?
No, not at all.
You could care less.
I mean, WashU does plenty of things that embarrass me, Brad. A guy putting stickers on Tesla doesn't embarrass me.
Okay, let's change subjects. Let's go to Elliott Davis. You and I, you sent me something on this, and it's sort of interesting is that the Board of Aldermen is proposing new regulations, rules, whatever you want to call it, about who can come and sit in the Board of Aldermen meetings. Essentially, they're trying to vet who they call press and who they do not call press. Do I have that pretty much correct?
Yeah, I think so. In other words, and let's just cut to the chase, Brad, real quick. I think what it comes down to is Elliott Davis, former newsman on television, now newsman on Facebook, he's had a few scraps with president of the Board of Aldermen, Megan Green. And I think it's fair to say that Megan Green doesn't want Elliott Davis there. And Elliott Davis says, I'm a journalist. That's fair, right?
Well, I have to tell you, I watched the video that Elliott did when he went into the Board of Aldermen, and I think he overdid it. I think he was baiting them for throwing him out, and they didn't do anything. Because if you saw the video, he's walking around, I'm here in the Board of Aldermen, and I've heard that Megan's going to kick me out, and blah, 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 blah. And it's almost to the point where he's wanting someone to come up and grab him by the arm and say, Mr. Davis, we are not allowing you in it anymore. There's the door. Don't let it hit you on the rear end on the way out. But nothing ever happened, okay? And what they're essentially saying is they're going to try to essentially declare who is a journalist and who's not. Now, once again, Brad, who has 2 useless degrees, which are both journalism degrees, I am all for the citizen journalist. And the guy you bring up all the time, I can never remember the guy's name. What's the guy you bring up from time to time who does excellent work? Who's the guy?
Jason Rivera.
Jason Rivera, okay? This guy should be working for the Post-Dispatch. Actually, he should be working for NPR because him, and the only 2 people who would actually produce stuff would be him and Jason Rosenbaum, but that's a whole other story. What is wrong with a citizen journalist, and how do you credential someone? I can tell you an interesting story, which I won't bother you with. It'll be another story. John will go, well, here, Brad goes over this story. When I started a news operation with the Traffic Network, that's for another day. But
that's News Plus, right, Brad?
News Plus, back in the day. But if you are someone who shows up at a meeting, and now you have in your hand what used to be $100,000 worth of equipment, which is now your average Android or iPhone, which
entry-level phone,
right? Yeah. Which does incredible video, and you can edit on your phone and blah 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 blah. Why can't you show up at places and record that? Why can't you be a citizen journalist? Why can't you be a person that has a Facebook page? And is someone going to say, well, unless you have 100,000 followers, you're really not serious about this? Well, everybody starts somewhere, right, John? If you start a Facebook page.
So. We've seen this not just so that's in the St. Louis City example. And by the way, I think there are municipalities who've made their laws. I hate to use the L word, liberal, but they made them a little bit more liberal in allowing more people to record. But we also see cases like in the Missouri legislature, our friend Austin Petersen, not to be confused with Camellia Petersen, but Austin Petersen at apforliberty.com was recording a Senate committee hearing, and a state senator from Kansas City, Barbara Washington, told him that he could not record unless he was on the pre-approved media list. And she reminded Austin Petersen that she is a lawyer and she likes to sue. And Austin, of course, kept repeating, much to the chagrin of Senator Washington. But you have somebody, Brad. I'm gonna aid stereotype, and you're not gonna like this. But you have an older crowd of people who are elected officials who say, in my day, we had a Capitol Bureau, and you had to wear a press pass around your neck, and that's the way it was, and we liked it. And then you have people like Austin Petersen, who's going to take his camera in at a committee in a building where he testifies, and someone's going to tell him he can't record. Get out of here.
You put me into the old category there. I'm for letting the thing just blow wide open to the point where see, the interesting part of this is that let's look at, and you're gonna get mad at me when I say this. Let's compare National Public Radio here in St. Louis Public Radio, KWMU, with the exception of Jason Rosenbaum, who does an excellent job. I counted again last night. They still have over 30. They apparently a couple of them gone because we had 34. I counted over the weekend because I had this argument with somebody else. They have over 30 journalists there, okay? They produce no local news on the weekend. You can't hear any local news on NPR or KWMU, St. Louis Public Radio, whatever they call it on Saturday, Sunday. No local news whatsoever. Okay? There are people out there producing more news, 2 or 3 people, than the entire staff of St. Louis Public Radio. And they're doing it unpaid. They're doing it there as citizen journalists. Okay? I say more power to them. Some people would say,
absolutely,
well,
right?
they don't have a formal training. So, so once again, why do you have to have, and I have a journalism degree, 2 of them, which are worthless, because of the fact that if you're doing a good job and you're essentially, covering things and you're doing video and you're chopping it up and you're putting it online, you know what? You're doing what the journalists do, and maybe you don't have the bias that NPR has or the bias that Channel 5 has or the bias that Channel 2 has or whatever. You're essentially telling part of the story. Let's go. Everybody's...
Yeah, or let me interrupt, Brad, or let me add on to that, which is maybe you do have a bias and you say, hey, I'm biased, and here's the video of what happened at this committee hearing. By the way, folks who want to watch the Austin Petersen versus Barbara Washington story, in which Senator Washington threatened to sue Austin Petersen, you can find that at johncomest.com. Just look up February 13 or go to search and look up Austin Petersen. Brad, the story that we were talking about with St. Louis Magazine, for folks who want to find that, I'll put it in the description of this if you go to YouTube at bjshow.video. The story from St. Louis Magazine is written by Ryan Kroll, and you can Google the headline, Aldermen Seek to Sort Out Who's a Journalist.
And an excellent article by Ryan. I read the thing as well, too, because I saw that on your site. I think that Sarafensky, I guess they're picking up the mantle where the Riverfront Times left off. They're trying to do some really good journalism, and they are breaking some stories. I know that's not their main thing because St. Louis Magazine has always sort of been sort of the upper crust kind of magazine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, very glossy. I would describe them as glossy and like society focused, right?
Right.
Like if you want to see some hot Ladue chicks with bolt-ons wearing wacky hats at a Kentucky Derby party, you would go to St. Louis Magazine.
John succinctly categorizes. I'm not going to touch that. Okay.
Yeah, you should. Brad, I'd love to stay on chat, but I just ordered some F. Brad stickers, and I'm going to put them on golf carts in Cottleville today.
But have you read the Cottleville rules? I posted those on my Facebook page recently.
I don't know. I'm going to talk to my homeowners association, Karen. She didn't like one of my women's bottom cut bikinis, so I'm going to talk to her about my chickens. And hopefully, I don't know, if the conversation goes well, she might choke it. I mean, to harvest the eggs and the beef, Brad, and the white breast meat.